The air inside the sprawling Burbank studio was electric, thick with a mixture of high-end hairspray and palpable tension. Gleaming stainless steel countertops reflected the bright, unforgiving television lights, turning the state-of-the-art kitchen into an arena. Today was no ordinary cooking show. It was a clash of cultures, a collision of titans, orchestrated for a primetime charity special that had the internet buzzing for weeks. The production crew moved with a nervous energy, double-checking every camera angle and every perfectly polished pan. Gordon Ramsay arrived first, as expected, stepping onto the set like a general surveying a battlefield. His chef's whites were impeccably starched, a stark contrast to the casual hum of the LA crew. He moved with a clipped, precise energy, his eyes scanning every detail with an intensity that could curdle milk. He tapped a countertop, listening for the right feel, adjusted a single stray knife by a millimeter, and exuded an aura of absolute control. For him, this was not just television. It was a sacred space where excellence was the only acceptable outcome. His focus was a silent storm, a palpable force that made everyone on set stand a little straighter. He ignored the fawning producers attempting to make small talk, his mind, already 3 steps ahead, visualizing the dish, the process, the inevitable points of failure. The challenge for the day was his own creation, a delicate, technically demanding pan-seared scallop with a saffron risotto. It was a dish that required finesse, timing, and an unwavering respect for classical technique, a test designed to separate the chefs from the pretenders. Then, the studio doors slid open, and a wave of cool seemed to roll through the tense atmosphere, accompanied by a faint scent of something distinctly not on the menu. Snoop Dogg glided onto the set, not walking, but floating in a cloud of charisma, dressed in a royal blue tracksuit with gold chains resting comfortably around his neck. He looked less like a contestant and more like a king visiting his court. He gave a relaxed nod to the crew, a wide, easy grin spreading across his face as he took in the scene. The contrast was immediate and almost comical. Where Gordon was a tightly coiled spring of kinetic energy, Snoop was a smooth, flowing river. He surveyed the kitchen not as a workspace, but as a playground. His eyes, hidden behind cool shades, didn't scan for imperfections. They scanned for a vibe, an energy, a place to create something soulful. The producers had promised a spectacle, a fusion of 2 worlds, but now, seeing them in the same room, it felt more like setting up a chemical reaction with unknown and potentially explosive elements. Gordon turned, his arms crossed as Snoop approached. The handshake was brief, a meeting of 2 entirely different forms of energy. Gordon's grip was firm and professional. Snoop's was loose and lingering. "Snoop," Gordon said, his tone a flat line of courtesy. "Glad you could make it." Snoop simply smiled, his gaze drifting over the pristine cooking station. "For shizzle, chef, let's get this party started. What we whippin' up for the people?" Gordon's eye twitched slightly at the casualness. He gestured curtly to the ingredients laid out with surgical precision. "Today, we are creating a masterpiece of subtlety and skill. Pan-seared scallops with a saffron risotto." He enunciated each word with a weight that implied centuries of French culinary tradition. Snoop peered at the delicate saffron threads and the perfectly uniform scallops. He nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face, before turning to his own prep station. The air was now thick with a new kind of silence, the quiet before the storm. Gordon watched him, a hawk observing a curious new creature in its territory. Snoop, unfazed, pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, and with a tap, a mellow G-funk beat began to fill the kitchen. It wasn't loud, but it was a declaration. This was his space now, too. Gordon's jaw tightened. He believed in the silent symphony of a working kitchen, the sizzle of the pan, the chop of the knife. This introduction of an unsanctioned rhythm was the first crack in his fortress of control. The cameras started rolling, the floor manager counted down, and the bright red, on-air light blinked to life. Gordon plastered on a strained television, smile, his posture rigid. Snoop, on the other hand, swayed gently to the music, picking up a knife with the relaxed grace of a musician picking up his instrument. The challenge had been set, the stage was lit, and the 2 stars were ready. But they weren't preparing to cook together. They were preparing for a battle over the soul of the kitchen itself. The director in the control room leaned into his microphone, a grin spreading across his face. And action, he whispered, knowing full well that what was about to unfold would be anything but a scripted performance. The forced smiles, the simmering tension, the quiet beat of Snoop's speaker against the sterile silence of Gordon's standards. It was all there. This was going to be television gold. A beautiful, magnificent, and utter train wreck. The fans had no idea what they were in for. This kitchen, designed for harmony and precision, had just become the epicenter of a cultural earthquake. Gordon, Ramsay, the master of militant perfection, was about to learn that some ingredients can't be measured in grams or milliliters. And Snoop Dogg, the epitome of cool creativity, was about to step into a world where a single mistake could result in a legendary verbal lashing. The first timer had started, and with it, a countdown to chaos. The initial task was simple: dicing the shallots for the risotto base. Gordon's knife was a blur of controlled aggression, each slice perfect, creating a pile of glistening microscopic cubes in seconds. He worked with an intense, focused silence, a surgeon in his operating theater. Across the island, Snoop chopped to the rhythm of his music, his movements languid and unhurried. The pieces were less uniform, more rustic, chopped with feeling, rather than military precision. Gordon's gaze flickered over, his disapproval a tangible force. The first 15 minutes passed in a haze of feigned cooperation. Gordon dictated the initial steps for the risotto with the patience of a man defusing a bomb, his voice tight. "The rice must be toasted, Snoop, gently. We need to coat every grain with the butter and shallots to build the foundation of the flavor." He demonstrated with a swift, efficient stir, his wrist moving with practiced economy. It was a lesson, a command disguised as a friendly tip, and the entire studio could feel the weight of his instruction. Snoop, however, was in his own world, a culinary bubble filled with his laid-back rhythm. He nodded at Gordon's instruction, but seemed to be listening to a different chef entirely, perhaps one in his own head. "I feel you, chef. Gotta give that rice some love," he murmured, adding a splash of white wine a few seconds before Gordon had instructed. It was a minor deviation, almost imperceptible, but in Ramsay's world of precision timing, it was a cardinal sin. A muscle in Gordon's jaw began to pulse, a telltale sign of a brewing storm. The tension escalated when it came to seasoning. Gordon pulled out a small digital scale. "For this quantity of risotto, we need exactly 12 grams of salt, added in 3 stages," he declared, his voice leaving no room for debate. He measured the salt with the focus of a diamond cutter, ensuring the reading was perfect. For him, cooking was science, a series of repeatable chemical reactions that, when executed flawlessly, produced perfection. There was no room for guesswork or improvisation in the fundamentals. Snoop watched this display with an amused curiosity. When it was his turn to season his pot, he simply picked up the salt cellar, closed his eyes for a moment as if in meditation, and sprinkled a cascade of salt directly from the container. "Nah, see, you gotta let the ancestors guide your hand, chef," Snoop explained with a calm smile. "They let you know when it's enough." Gordon stared, utterly speechless. The idea of ancestral guidance in his Michelin-starred process was so foreign, so anarchic that he couldn't even formulate a response. The simmering descent finally boiled over with the saffron. Gordon had bloomed the delicate, expensive threads in a small bowl of warm water, creating a vibrant, golden liquid. "This is the soul of the dish, Snoop. It must be treated with respect," he whispered, handling the bowl as if it were the holy grail. He poured half of it into his risotto with the reverence of a priest. The aroma that filled the air was earthy, luxurious, and subtle, a testament to his refined technique. Snoop, meanwhile, looked at his own bowl of saffron water, and then glanced over at a small container of turmeric on the spice rack. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. "You know what this needs? A little bit of that sunshine color," he said, taking a hefty pinch of the bright yellow powder and adding it to his pot. "Gotta make it pop, you know? The camera." The crew gasped. It was a creative choice, but one that completely bulldozed the subtle elegance of the saffron. Gordon froze. His stirring spoon hovered over his risotto as he turned slowly to face Snoop. The television smile was gone, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "What did you just do?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "Did you just put cheap, overpowering turmeric into a saffron risotto?" The G-Funk track on Snoop's speaker suddenly felt incredibly loud in the suffocating silence that followed. The chaos was no longer simmering, it had arrived. Snoop seemed unfazed by the shift in energy. "Just addin' a little something-something, my man. Giving it my own spin," he replied, giving his now fluorescent yellow risotto a stir. "It's all love." But Gordon saw it as a declaration of war on everything he stood for. It was a flagrant disregard for tradition, for technique, for the very essence of the dish. It wasn't just an ingredient, it was an act of culinary heresy committed on his stage. Spin? Love? Gordon's voice started to rise, the famous Ramsay, roar beginning to build from deep within his chest. "You've just annihilated the most expensive spice in the world with a cheap dye. This isn't a spin. It's a disgrace. You don't feel a risotto, you build it, you respect it." Each word was a shotgun blast across the stainless steel island, echoing through the now silent studio. The playful atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by the chilling reality of a master's fury. The director in the control booth was ecstatic, whispering, "Keep rolling, keep all cameras on them," to his crew. This was the conflict they had dreamed of. The raw, unfiltered clash of two opposing forces. On screen, Snoop's cool demeanor finally began to crack. He stopped stirring and put his hands on his hips, his easygoing smile tightening at the edges. The party was officially over, and the real show was just beginning. Gordon pointed a trembling finger at Snoop's pot. "That is not risotto. That is a yellow monstrosity. It's a joke!" he bellowed, his face turning a shade of crimson that matched the on-air light. The crew members tried to make themselves small, avoiding eye contact, wishing the steel counters could swallow them whole. They were witnessing the full force of a culinary hurricane making landfall, and it was aimed directly at the calmest man in show business. Snoop finally set his spoon down and turned off his speaker. The silence was now absolute. "Yo, chill, man," he said, his voice low but firm, shedding the playful persona for a moment of raw confrontation. "It's just food. Ain't no need to get all bent out of shape." But he had fundamentally misunderstood. To Gordon Ramsay, it was never just food. It was his life, his art, his religion. And Snoop had just committed blasphemy on live television. The final step was the scallops. Gordon's were perfect, seared to a deep golden-brown crust while the inside remained tender and translucent. He plated them with the precision of a jeweler, arranging them in a perfect arc over his creamy, saffron-hued risotto. It was a picture of elegance, a dish worthy of any 3-Michelin-star restaurant. He worked with a furious, focused silence, his anger now channeled into his craft, creating perfection out of sheer force of will. Snoop, on the other hand, had cooked his scallops with a generous knob of butter and a sprinkle of lemon pepper, letting them sizzle until they were cooked through. His plating was a Jackson Pollock-esque creation. He spooned his vibrant turmeric-yellow risotto onto the plate and scattered the scallops over the top, finishing with a flourish of chopped parsley. It was bold, it was colorful, and it was everything Gordon's dish was not. It was Snoop on a plate, unapologetically himself. The moment of truth arrived. As per the show's format, they had to taste each other's creations. Gordon picked up a fork, his movements stiff with reluctance, and took a small, hesitant bite of Snoop's dish. He chewed once, twice, and his face contorted into a mask of theatrical agony. He dramatically reached for a napkin and spit the food out. "What in God's name is that? The texture is rubbery, it's overpowered with that ghastly turmeric. It tastes like a Goodyear tire rolled in a sandbox," the crew winced. The insults were classic Ramsay, but they were delivered with a genuine venom that felt deeply personal. It wasn't for the cameras anymore. This was a raw, unfiltered critique born of pure frustration. Snoop watched him, his expression unreadable. Behind his shades, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. He had been publicly disrespected, his creative effort dismissed as garbage. The laid-back facade was being chipped away with every venomous word Gordon spat. Then it was Snoop's turn. He calmly walked over to Gordon's station, picked up a clean fork, and took a bite of the perfect risotto. He chewed thoughtfully, letting the flavors settle on his palate. He nodded slowly, then looked directly at Gordon. "It's nice," he said, his voice even. Real nice. A little boring, though. Needs some soul. Tastes like something you'd eat at a fancy hospital. The comment, delivered with such calm, was more devastating than any shouting match. It hit Gordon where he was most vulnerable. His artistry. Boring. Gordon's face went from red to a deep, dangerous purple. Boring? This is technique. This is refinement. This is decades of discipline in a single bite, and you call it boring? He roared, slamming his palm down on the steel counter with a bang that made everyone jump. You come into my world, my kitchen, with your music and your ancestral salt, and you dare to critique my craft? You have no respect. None. This was the breaking point. The carefully constructed reality of the television special shattered into a million pieces. The fun, quirky collaboration was now a bitter, personal war. Snoop took off his sunglasses, and for the first time his eyes showed a flash of genuine anger. My craft? Man, you think cooking is only your way? Stiff and stuck up? Food is about joy, about feeling. Something you clearly know nothing about, he shot back, his voice cutting through the tension. He untied the strings of his apron and threw it onto the counter next to his turmeric-yellow risotto. I'm done, he announced to the stunned studio. This ain't fun. The vibe is dead. I'm out. He turned his back on Gordon, on the producers, on the millions of people watching at home, and started walking towards the studio exit. The dream team up had devolved into a nightmare. The kitchen chaos had reached its peak, and now the biggest star was walking away. The director's voice screamed in the producer's earpieces. Stop him! Do not let him leave the building! A frantic producer, a young woman named Maria, scrambled from behind the cameras, her face pale with panic. She rushed after Snoop, calling his name, her voice trembling slightly. The entire multi-million-dollar production was on the verge of collapsing, live on air. The spectacle of chaos had become a very real crisis. Gordon stood frozen in his spot, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked at his perfect, untouched dish, then at the half-eaten plate of Snoop's creation. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something other than anger crossed his face. Was it regret? Confusion? He had won the battle of technique. But in doing so, he had completely destroyed the bridge they were supposed to be building. The silence that Snoop's departure left behind was more damning than any insult. The cameras remained fixed on the drama, one following Snoop's determined stride towards the door. The other zoomed in on Gordon's conflicted, furious face. The audience was left hanging, caught in the crossfire of a spectacular meltdown. The promise of a fun, chaotic cook-off had been delivered, but the cost was now terrifyingly real. Partnership was broken, the show was in jeopardy, and two legends stood on opposite sides of a chasm of their own making. Snoop pushed the heavy studio door open, letting in a slice of the mundane outside world that seemed a universe away from the drama inside. Maria reached him just as he was about to step into the hallway, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Snoop, please, she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. Don't go. We can fix this. Snoop paused, his back still to the set, the weight of the entire show resting on his next move. It's officially hit the fan. Total chaos. Is this the end of the most anticipated collaboration of the year? We need to know what you think. Drop a comment below. Are you Team Ramsay or Team Snoop? And while you're down there, if your heart is pounding as much as ours, do us a favor and smash that like button. Now, let's see if this can be saved. In the stark, echoing hallway outside the main studio, the frantic energy of the set felt miles away. Maria, the producer, kept a light but firm hand on Snoop's arm, her expression a mixture of desperation and genuine empathy. 5 minutes, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting in her earpiece. Just give me 5 minutes. We're doing this for charity, Snoop, for the kids' music programs. That's the only reason you agreed to this. Snoop stopped, but he didn't turn around immediately. He let the weight of her words sink in. He had almost forgotten the real reason he was there, lost in the clash of egos and the sterile, unforgiving glare of the studio lights. The charity was close to his heart. A program that gave inner-city kids access to the kind of creative outlets that had saved his own life. He let out a long, slow breath, the anger beginning to recede, replaced by a weary sense of obligation. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen arena, another producer, an older, calmer man named David, approached Gordon. He didn't rush. He moved with a deliberate pace that cut through the panic. He stood beside the fuming chef for a moment, simply looking at the two contrasting dishes. "He's an artist, Gordon," David said quietly, his voice a low rumble. "He's not a sous chef from your kitchen. You knew that coming in. His art is just louder than yours." Gordon didn't respond, but the tightness in his shoulders seemed to lessen almost imperceptibly. David continued, "The world wants to see you two create something, not destroy each other. They want to see what happens when your discipline meets his creativity. Right now, all they see is a fight." He gestured towards the door. "Go talk to him, not as Chef Ramsay, the TV star, but as Gordon, the man who loves food more than anyone I know." Guided by their respective producers, the two stars were led to a neutral space, Gordon's small, Spartan office just off the set. The room was bland and impersonal, a world away from the gleaming kitchen. There were no cameras, no crew, just two chairs and a desk. Maria and David closed the door behind them, leaving the two men alone in the heavy silence. For a full minute, neither of them spoke, the air thick with unspoken accusations and wounded pride. Finally, it was Gordon who broke the silence, a feat that seemed to require more effort than any culinary task. "My grandmother," he began, his voice surprisingly soft, almost hoarse. "She cooked by feel, never measured a thing in her life. Drove my first mentor mad." He was looking at his hands, not at Snoop. I spent so long fighting against that, proving that precision could create art. I forgot that art can also come from chaos." It was the closest he could get to an apology. Snoop listened, his expression shifting from guarded anger to curiosity. He saw a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man behind the terrifying celebrity chef. "My grandma," Snoop countered with a small, wry smile. "She taught me that food is supposed to make people feel good. It's like a song. You got your notes, and your chords, yeah. But if it ain't got no soul, no one's gonna dance to it." He finally looked Gordon in the eye. "Your food has all the right notes, chef. But I couldn't hear the music." This was the breakthrough. They were speaking the same language, just in different dialects. Gordon looked up, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He had been so obsessed with the technical composition that he'd forgotten the emotional performance. He had insulted Snoop's process without ever trying to understand the philosophy behind it. He had demanded respect for his craft, but had offered none for Snoop's. The realization settled heavily in the quiet room. "Perhaps," Gordon conceded, his pride still smarting. "Perhaps my palate has become too rigid." He leaned forward, a new kind of intensity in his gaze. "Your methods are unorthodox. They are, by all professional standards, wrong." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But the reaction to my dish, hospital food, it was not entirely inaccurate. It was perfect, but perhaps it was perfection without a pulse." Snoop leaned back in his chair, a genuine smile returning to his face for the first time in an hour. "See, now we're cooking," he said, the old rhythm returning to his voice. "So what we gonna do, chef? We gonna go out there and give the people a remix? A little bit of that classical science, a little bit of that West Coast soul?" He extended a hand across the desk, an offer of a genuine truce. Gordon looked at the offered hand. It represented everything he fought against: improvisation, a lack of formal structure, vibes. But it also represented a chance to create something truly new, something he could never create on his own. He thought of the charity, of the audience, and of the surprising sting of being called boring. With a deep breath that seemed to expel the last of his fury, he took Snoop's hand. The grip was firm, a pact made in the quiet eye of the storm. They walked back onto the set together, side by side. A wave of relief washed over the crew. The producers in the control room let out a collective sigh. When Gordon and Snoop reached their stations, Gordon did something that stunned everyone. He walked over to Snoop's abandoned speaker, picked it up, and set it between their two workstations. "Let's find a new rhythm," he said, loud enough for the boom mics to catch. The chaos was over. The collaboration was about to begin. The mood on set had transformed. The nervous tension had been replaced by a quiet, focused anticipation. Gordon cleared both of their disastrous first attempts from the counters with a decisive sweep, declaring them a lesson learned. He then walked to the pantry, followed by Snoop, the cameras trailing them closely. "New challenge," Gordon announced, a new light in his eyes. "We create one dish, together, from scratch. No recipe," Snoop's grin widened. "Now you're talking my language, chef. Let's make something they ain't never seen before." They surveyed the ingredients, no longer as adversaries, but as co-conspirators. Gordon's mind immediately went to complex proteins and classic pairings, but he stopped himself. He turned to Snoop. "What do you feel like making?" he asked, the simple question a monumental concession. Snoop's eyes lit up. He pointed to a beautiful rack of lamb and then to a basket of fresh mint and a container of sweet potatoes. "I'm feeling something elegant, but with some down-home comfort," he said. "Like a king's barbecue. Let's do a lamb lollipop, but with a glaze that's sweet, spicy, and sticky. And on the side, some whipped sweet potatoes that are smooth as a classic soul record." The vision was clear, creative, and completely off the cuff. Gordon considered it for a moment, his mind dissecting the proposal. Lamb, sweet potato, mint, the core components were classic. But Snoop's sticky, spicy, sweet glaze was a wild card. Instead of dismissing it, Gordon embraced it. "All right," he said with a nod. "I will handle the perfect execution of the lamb. The temperature, the sear, the resting time. The science, as you'd call it. The glaze and the potatoes, their soul, that's your department." A new dynamic was born. Gordon expertly Frenched the rack of lamb, his knife skills on full display, creating perfect, elegant lollipops. He explained the importance of rendering the fat cap to create a crispy texture, his voice no longer condescending, but instructional and collaborative. Snoop watched, genuinely interested, asking questions about the technique, absorbing the knowledge. The master was teaching, but the student was also a master in his own right. Meanwhile, Snoop assembled the ingredients for his glaze. He eschewed measuring cups, instead pouring pomegranate molasses, a dash of soy sauce, a spoonful of chili garlic paste, and a squeeze of fresh lime juice into a saucepan. He added a sprig of rosemary, a controversial choice that made Gordon raise an eyebrow, but he said nothing. Snoop was in his element, tasting, adjusting, and creating a symphony of flavors based on instinct and experience. The kitchen became a dance. Gordon seared the lamb lollipops in a hot pan, the sound a sharp, confident sizzle. He basted them with butter and thyme, his movements precise and efficient. He monitored the internal temperature with a digital thermometer, pulling them from the heat at the exact moment they reached a perfect medium rare. He was a machine of perfection, but now there was a new purpose to his work, to provide the perfect canvas for Snoop's art. As the lamb rested, Snoop worked on his glaze, simmering it down until it was thick and glossy. He tasted it one last time, then nodded in satisfaction. He turned to the sweet potatoes, which had been roasting in the oven. He mashed them with butter, a touch of cream, and a surprising ingredient, a hint of smoked paprika to balance the sweetness. Gordon watched, fascinated by the flavor combinations he never would have considered. The collaboration became verbal as well as physical. "The glaze needs to coat the lamb just before serving, so the crust stays crisp," Gordon advised. Snoop nodded. "And we need a little something fresh to cut through the richness," Snoop suggested, grabbing a handful of fresh mint and cilantro. "A little herb salad on top." Gordon considered it, then agreed. "Excellent idea. It will add a vibrant top note." They moved around the small space in a fluid, unpracticed harmony. The G-funk on the speaker provided a steady, mellow backbeat to their work. There were moments of shared laughter, like when Snoop nearly added gin to the sweet potatoes out of habit, and Gordon caught him with a mock glare. The tension was gone, replaced by a palpable sense of mutual respect and creative joy. They were no longer two celebrities. They were two chefs, united by a common goal. The final plating was a joint effort. Gordon arranged the creamy sweet potato mash on the plate with an artistic swirl. Snoop then took the rested lamb lollipops, painted them with his glistening dark red glaze, and laid them gently on the mash. Gordon added a few perfectly turned vegetables for color and structure. and Snoop finished it with his fresh, bright herb salad. They stood back and looked at their creation. It was beautiful. It had the elegance and precision of a Ramsay dish, but the bold, unexpected swagger of a Snoop Dogg creation. The aroma was intoxicating, rich, savory, sweet, and spicy all at once. It was a dish that belonged to neither of them and both of them, a true fusion born from the ashes of their earlier conflict. They hadn't just made a meal, they had created a story on a plate. The entire studio crew gathered around the plating station, drawn in by the incredible aroma and the transformed energy between the two stars. The director, sensing a powerful final moment, had the cameras circle the dish, capturing every glistening detail of the glazed lamb and the vibrant greens. There was no formal judging panel this time. The verdict would be delivered by the very people who had witnessed the meltdown and the reconciliation. It was a more fitting, more authentic conclusion. Gordon and Snoop worked together to create small tasting plates for everyone. They moved with an easy familiarity, passing utensils and ingredients back and forth without a word, a silent understanding having replaced their earlier friction. As they handed out the plates, a hush fell over the set. This was more than just tasting food. It was tasting the result of a hard-won piece, testament to the power of collaboration over conflict. The first bites were taken in unison. A moment of silence followed, and then an eruption of spontaneous applause. The crew members' faces lit up with genuine delight and surprise. The lamb was perfectly cooked, tender, and juicy. The glaze was a revelation, a complex explosion of sweet, tangy, and spicy notes that danced on the tongue. The creamy, smoky sweet potatoes were the perfect, comforting base to anchor the bold flavors. It was, by all accounts, a masterpiece. A cameraman, forgetting his professional decorum for a moment, exclaimed, "That's the best thing I've eaten in my life." Maria, the producer who had stopped Snoop from leaving, had tears welling in her eyes. She wasn't just crying because the dish was good. She was crying because she had witnessed two immense, stubborn talents find a way to create something beautiful, together. She had seen the worst of them, and now she was tasting the best of them. Gordon watched the reactions, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. He wasn't smiling at his own technical success, but at the joy his and Snoop's shared creation was bringing to people. He turned to Snoop, who was soaking in the positive vibes with a cool, satisfied grin. "Snoop," Gordon said, his voice filled with a respect that was entirely new. "You magnificent, unorthodox, crazy son of a bitch. It's absolutely brilliant." Snoop chuckled, a deep, warm sound. "Faux shizzle, chef," he replied, bumping his fist against Gordon's. "Told you we just needed to find the right beat." The animosity was a distant memory, replaced by the strong bond of a shared creative victory. They had started as oil and water, two incompatible elements, but through conflict and conversation, they had emulsified into something extraordinary. The crew finished their plates and the buzz of excitement continued. Gordon and Snoop began cleaning their shared station. There was no sense of hierarchy. They worked side by side, wiping down the counters and stacking the pans. The simple, humble act of cleaning up together felt more profound than any grand gesture. It was the quiet work that follows a great performance, a shared responsibility, after a shared success. The Los Angeles sun began to set, casting long golden rays through the studio's high windows. The harsh television lights were powered down, replaced by a warmer, more intimate glow. The day, which had begun with so much tension and had nearly ended in disaster, was now closing with a sense of peace and accomplishment. The chaos had not been the end of the story, but merely the catalyst for an unexpected and powerful transformation. In the control room, the director knew he had more than just a successful TV special. He had captured a genuine human story about overcoming differences, about the surprising places where common ground can be found. It was a story of how true creativity isn't about one right way, but about the fusion of different perspectives. It was a lesson in humility for one man, and a confirmation of philosophy for another. As they finished cleaning, Gordon turned to Snoop. "I'm opening a new restaurant in Vegas next year," he said, almost casually. "I want to feature a dish on the opening night menu. A guest creation." He paused, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I was thinking of something like Lamb lollipops with a pomegranate chili glaze by Chef Snoop. It was the ultimate sign of respect, an invitation into his world on Snoop's own terms. Snoop's smile was wide and bright. "I'm down," he said, "but you gotta let me curate the playlist for the kitchen." Gordon laughed, a real, unforced laugh that echoed through the quiet studio. "Deal," he said. They walked towards the exit together, no longer a chef and a rapper, but two artists who had found a surprising harmony, leaving behind an empty, clean kitchen that still smelled faintly of victory. The final shot was of them leaving the studio, silhouetted against the California sunset, deep in conversation. Two legends from different universes who had collided, clashed, and ultimately created something unforgettable. The kitchen chaos had ended not with a winner and a loser, but with a partnership forged in fire, proving that sometimes the best recipes are the ones you write together, from total chaos to a taste of pure victory. That's the magic of pushing past our differences. What did you think of their final dish? Let us know in the comments. If this story proved to you that anything is possible with a little respect and collaboration, smash that like button. And please, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible true-to-life stories. Thanks for watching.